Hello everyone, I'm Debbie Williams from San Joaquin County Office of Education's Department of Mathematics. Welcome to Math Art with Desmos. I'm excited to share with you a creative way to do art while using some math you already know. Take a moment and look at the drawings on this slide. What do you notice? What questions come to mind? Pause the video for a moment to give yourself some time to think. You may have noticed drawings in color and black and white, and some drawings with shading and without. And you may have also noticed the squares or grid lines in the background and the vertical and horizontal axes of a graph. So you might be wondering how they do that. Is it easy or does it require knowing a lot of advanced mathematics? And what is Desmos anyway? Today I'm going to show you how you can use Desmos, a free online graphing calculator, to create art just like this. You will decide the level of mathematics you want to use, from plotting points to graphing advanced mathematical functions. Before we get started, I suggest you use the link shown at the bottom of this slide to get your own copy of this slideshow, so you can access some of the additional resources I've collected for you. So why mathematics and art? Take a moment and look at these three images. Can you find the math behind the art? Pause the video again to give yourself some time to think. Some of the most beautiful and creative works of art don't just happen. Mathematics sometimes plays a role. This first image was created by Leonardo da Vinci, who is known for using the golden ratio in many of his most famous works. Can you see the golden ratio in the Mona Lisa? This second image was created by graphic artist M.C. Escher, known for creating intriguing optical effects. Can you see how he's using geometry to achieve these optical effects? And finally, Pixar, known for some of the best animated films like Monsters, Inc. and Toy Story. Can you see how they use algebra and geometry to create the characters Mike Wazowski and James P. Sullivan? Well, who knew there was math in the movies? Pause the video again and click on this link in blue to watch a TED Ed talk with Pixar research lead Tony DeRose. And he explains how math creates some of these animations. I hope you took the time to watch the video and see how the math we learn in middle school and high school is used to make some of these Pixar animated films. So let's go ahead and get started with Desmos. If you're viewing this on a computer, you need to pause the video, open up a tab, and go to desmos.com to download or access the free online graphing calculator. Once you get there, click Start Graphing. If you're viewing this on a phone or tablet, go to the App Store or to Google Play and download the free Desmos Graphing Calculator app. Once you get in, this is what you'll see. And the first thing you want to do is to create an account or sign in if you already have an account. So in the upper right-hand corner, you can see the button to create an account or to sign in. I already have an account, so I'm going to sign in. When you're signed in, you'll see your name appear in the upper right-hand corner. Before we get started creating art, I just want to give you a little overview of some of the things that you see. So let's start over on the left-hand corner. You see a plus sign. When you click on the plus sign, we can add items to this little list that you can see appears here on the side, list 1, 2, 3, and so on. So click on the plus sign, and we're going to start by adding in a table. Notice as soon as I do that, I have two arrows here, and one of them turns black. This is the undo and redo arrows. So if you ever make a mistake, don't panic. Just click the undo button, and it will undo whatever you just did. So you can see how my table disappeared. To the right of that, you can see this little icon. It looks like a gear. That's our edit list icon. And we're going to actually use that in just a couple of minutes. To the right of that, you see double arrows. The double arrows lets us hide this expressions list. So when I click on the double arrows, all I see is my graph. You may want to use this if you want to take a picture of the art that you end up creating. So I can click on the double arrows again to see my list. And finally, you see some of these X's. So let me add that table back in. And suppose I had something here and I decided, well, I really don't want that. I want to get rid of it. How do I delete? Well, you just click on that little X and it goes away. Over on the right, you see 3 more buttons. One little button looks like it's a wrench. You notice that that gives us access to our graph settings. So go ahead and click on that. Projector mode just enhances the lines and makes everything a little bit darker and bigger so we could see it. You also see that there are some tools to provide access for visually impaired students. And you can also see that there are some check boxes that we could use to either turn on or turn off the background. So I'm going to leave the projector mode on so you can see the grid a little bit more easily. You can see how I can easily get rid of the background. So once I'm done creating my art, if I wanted to get rid of the graph, I could easily put it back by just clicking on those boxes again. To close this graph setting windows, just click in the grid area and it disappears. You notice that we have a plus and a minus button. The plus button lets us zoom in and you can see the scale on my graph change. The minus button lets us zoom out, and again, the scale on the graph changes. You might find that you have played with this a little too much, and you're like, oh, how do I get this back to what I had originally? So you can just click on this little house icon, and it takes you back to the default settings of where we began. So let's get started creating art with the simplest strategy, plotting points. Now, if you want to see how to create art with lines or functions, feel free to fast forward a few minutes to that part of the video. But we are going to begin by connecting the dots. So let's go back to our plus sign and add in a table. And all you have to do is type in the coordinates of a point. I'm just going to start off with, say, 0, 2. It's a nice point right in the middle of my graph. And I want to think about what is it that I want to create around this point. I think to get started, I'm going to just make something simple, maybe just a little heart, because a heart would be fairly simple, because if I can figure out how to do half the heart, the second half is going to be very similar. So it might be something easy to start off with. So I have my first point. I just need to plot a second point. A heart. Say this is the middle of the heart, I want it to go up, so I need another point a little bit higher and farther to the right. So let's add another point, say at 1, 3. So that looks pretty good. The only problem is they're not connected. And so this is where we go to that little gear icon to change the setting of how these points are plotted. My points are green, so I can just click on that little green dot. And a little window appears that gives me some different options for how those points are going to appear. Right now, it's the solid dot is selected. I could click on an open dot. So maybe I'm going to create a piece of art with an eyeball. And so maybe I want that to be an eyeball. Or maybe I'm going to create a treasure map and I want my X to mark the spot of the treasure. I'm going to leave it as a solid dot for now. And so because I'm making a heart, I think I'm going to change my color to red. Red would just be a prettier heart, in my opinion. And you can see I have 2 more toggle switches that I could choose. If I click on the lines switch, you can see 3 buttons appear. The first one connects my dots with a solid line. The second one with a dashed line. And the third one with a dotted line. So again, you can be a little more creative with how you connect the dots. I'm going to keep it as a solid line. And there's one last toggle. This toggle allows you to create draggable points. And I'm going to let you explore that on your own. So I have my points set up to graph. I just need to continue to add points to my graph. So I had 0, 2, 1, 3. Maybe we just continue to go up by 1. So if I want to maybe go up and around, I want to continue and maybe go 3. Let's see, I have 0, 2, 1, 3. Let's try 2, 4. Well, that actually looks a little high. So if I make it 3, it's going to be flat. How about if I make it maybe 3.5? So it just starts to bend just slightly. And so that looks like it's going to make a nice little curve. And so I just want to start coming back down. So I need a point right here. This point was 1, 3. So I need it at the same height, 3, but now I want it to be at x equals 3. So if I do 3, 3, that looks pretty good. It's starting to come around. So my x's are just going up by 1. So I'm just going to put another point there at 4. And maybe I want it to go out a little bit. Actually, maybe I don't want it to go out a little bit. If it goes out a little bit, it might be kind of a fat heart. What if I have it come straight down? What would that look like? Actually, yeah, that does look better rounded out like that. So if I go around there, 4, 2, and then now maybe I want to come back down a little bit. So instead of continuing to go out, maybe I just go straight down. So I'm going to be at 4 again. And maybe I want it to, what would happen if I just come down 1? Okay, that looks pretty good. But I don't want to keep going down. I want it to start coming in a little bit. So let's go down to 3, 0. See how that works. That's starting to create a nice little heart there. It seems to be kind of a sharp turn though. It's coming in quickly. Maybe I want it to come down a little more slightly. So instead of 3, I'm going to change this to 3.5. So notice what I can do is I can just click where that x value was, and I can just type in 0.5 and easily change my points. So that's the great thing about Desmos, is you don't really have to know exactly where to put your points. You can just plot it and say, yeah, I like it. And if you don't, then you can just change the value of the number. So we just need to keep coming in. So let's change this again by a value of 1. So that's going to be 2.5 and -1. Let's see what that happens. Okay, that actually looks pretty good. So let's keep going on that pattern. Go down by 1, so it'd be 1.5, -2. I like that. Let's keep going. So maybe 0.5 and -3. And actually, that looks pretty good. It just didn't go all the way to the axis. So maybe instead of stopping at 0.5, what if I change this to 0? And that looks pretty good. So now I have half my heart. Take a moment and think, how can I use these values that I've already plotted to quickly complete the rest of my heart? Well, if you think about a heart, it has symmetry, which means if I fold it along this vertical y-axis, I'm going to have a mirror image on the other side. And so all of the points on the left side of my y-axis are going to be in the exact same location in terms of the height of the point, except that it's going to be on the left side where my x values are negative. So what I can do is I can just copy these point values but make the x values negative. So let's just continue going around. I just finished plotting 0, -3. If I wanted to come back up, I want this point to be a mirror image on the other side of the y-axis. This point is 1.5, -2. So I just need -1.5, -2. Perfect. So if I click on each point, it'll tell me the value. So I need -2.5, -1. -3.50. Going up, -4.1. -4.2. This is easy. -3.3. -1.3. Oh, got the wrong point. I needed -2, 3.5. I think I got ahead of myself. -2, 3.5. Oh, that's better. Now I need -1.3. And then I just need to connect it back to 0, 2. And I've completed my heart. So as soon as you finish your image and you want to save it, you notice in the upper left-hand corner, we can click on Untitled Graph, and I can name this. So I'm going to call this My Heart with dots, and I click Save. And now, because I had signed in, it's going to be kept forever and ever in this little section called the try bar. So you see these three horizontal lines. It's called a try bar, try as in three. There's three bars. When you click on it, you can see any graphs that you've saved. And so we've learned our first strategy of how to create art with dots. Let's look at how we can create the same heart using graphs of lines or functions. So let's clear our screen. If you click on the try bar, click on New Blank Graph, we have a clean canvas to begin our next piece of work. So now, instead of adding in a table, I can just type in the equation of a line. So the simplest form of an equation of a line is y equals mx, where m is some number. So I typed in y equals 2x. I just randomly chose 2. Again, you just type something in and see what you get. And so take a look at the graph of my line. And what do you notice about my graph? Well, one of the things you will notice, hopefully, is that it is really long, right? If I zoom in, zoom out, that line doesn't change because the graph of a function is infinite in length unless I tell the function how big I want it to be. In other words, I want to restrict the domain. What I mean by that is when you take a look at our function, I would input an x into my equation, and then that would determine what my y value is. And so our x is our input, our y is our output. And so the input values for a function are called the domain. And the way that we restricted the domain is using a special symbol called a brace. So on your keyboard, you might have a brace on your keyboard. If not, in the lower left-hand corner, you see this virtual keypad. If you click on that, you have to click on the ABC button in order to see some other symbols, and this is where you're going to see the braces. So you click on that, and this little symbol is going to allow us to shorten the length of our line by restricting the domain. I'm going to click on my home to get back to my original settings. And now suppose I want my line to just be a line segment that ends right here at the point 1, 2. So that means I want my input values for x to only go from 0 to 1. So in your braces, you're going to tell the function to go with x values only between 0 and 1 using less than symbols. So you type in 0 is less than x is less than 1. This is what we call inequality notation. And the way that we read this is x is between 0 and 1. And you can see that I've shortened my line. So I have the beginning of my heart. Now I want to come across. I could make little tiny segments, but just as an example, I'm just going to do a quick example of a heart with lines. I'm just going to come across. And so we know that the equation of a horizontal line is just a number. It's a constant. So you can say I have y equals 2. Notice that it automatically gives me a new color. I'll show you how to fix that. But we really want to shorten this line. And I only want it to be, say, maybe between 1 and 2 on my x-axis. So again, I'm going to type in my braces and say I want my x to be between 1 and 2. Oops, 2. There you go. Now, if you fast forwarded through the connect the dots strategy, you may have missed the little trick that we use to customize how our graph looks. You can click on this little icon right here called a gear, and then the blue represents my blue line. So I click on my little blue dot and I can just change the color. I could also change the appearance to a dashed line or a dotted line. I'm going to keep it solid. And now I have the makings of my heart. So now I want to start coming down. So you know that a graph with a positive slope is increasing. If I want to come down, I need a graph with a negative slope. So I'm just going to type in y equals negative 2x and see what I get. Well, I have a decreasing line, but I need it to be shifted over. So I want it to be more to the right. So I'm going to add some numbers to it. So let's just add 3. Well, it didn't shift it over enough. So I'm just going to delete that 3 and make it bigger. 4. It's getting closer. 5. 6. And that's exactly where I want it to be, intersecting my other line segment. I need to shorten this again. So say I want to shorten it between x's 2 and 3. So I type in my braces. 2 is less than x is less than 3. And then again, I can change my color to red. You can wait and change them all at once. I just like to do it as I go. Okay, so I want to come down. So I just want another line right here. It's going to have a positive slope. So let's go back with y equals 2x. But now I want to shift this down, right? Down here in this negative area. So I'm going to subtract a number. Okay, so it didn't quite get me as far as I wanted to go. Subtract a larger number, and that is better. But you notice it's actually pretty close to where I want it to hit my line segment. And so what I could do is change the slope of this graph. Right now the slope is positive 2. If I want it to be less steep, I just need to make this number smaller. So let's change it to 1. And you notice that it did make it less steep, but that's too much. So 2 was too steep. 1 is not steep enough. Let's try 1.5. That's better. 5 is a little bit too big. So let's try 4. That's better. Let's try 3. And that actually looks pretty good. So all I need to do is restrict my domain. So I want it to be from x equals 0 to x equals 3. So let's do my braces. I want x between 0 and 3. Okay. Well, actually, when I do that, it looks like it's not quite meeting all the way. I wonder if I make this a little steeper. What if I add a number to that? Oh, there you go. Just made it a little steeper, and it matched up. So again, to fine tune some of your graphs so they don't quite meet up, just change the values, by fraction. Remember I had 1.3, which is 1 3/10. I'm thinking, well, I know that repeated 3s is a third, so what if I make that just a slightly steeper, and it worked. So again, change this back to red, and I have half of my heart. So take a moment and think. I have half of my heart done. How can I use what I've already done to create the second half? Well, it turns out that we can use symmetry like we did with connect the dots and just use all of these same line segments, but just make some tweaks to them so that they appear on the left-hand side of my y-axis, which is my line of symmetry for my heart. And so an easy way to do that is going back to our little gearbox, and you see this little icon that looks like 2 pieces of paper. If you click on that, it's going to duplicate whatever you had typed in there. I'm going to go ahead and change the color on these so that you can keep track of my new function versus the original one that we had. So I just copied each one. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 segments. I copied them. Now I have 8 and click done. And you might be saying, well, I don't see 8 line segments. I only see 4, and that's because they're overlapping. So let's take a look at our first one, y equals 2x. I want it to look reflected across this y-axis, so I just need it to change this to a negative slope. If I make that negative, that works, but remember I also have to say where to graph the x values. I don't want to stay here between 0 and 1. Now I want to be between -1 and 0. So I change this to -1 and 0. Then I continue on. I don't need to change the second graph. I just need to change the domain. So my x values are going to go from -2 to -1, -2 to -1. Oh, didn't type in the negative. There we go, -2 to -1. And then again, this third graph, it is a negative slope. I want it to be a positive slope. So I'm just going to delete the negative sign. And then I just want to change the domain. Again, it needs to be here between -3 and -2. So change that to -3, -2. Looking good. And then my last one, again, I had a positive slope. I need a negative slope. So I change this to negative. And I need it to be between -3 and 0. So I change this to -3 and 0. And voila, I'm done. So again, click on my gearbox so I can go back and change all of these line segments to red. Click on done. And now I can save my heart made with lines. Capitalize that. And then now, whenever I want it, I just click on my try bar and I have my heart with dots and my heart with lines. So how could you create a heart that's a little curvier? Well, you need to know how to use some more complicated functions, but it's not that hard. And I have created a little tool for you to make it easier. So if you go back to our slideshow, on slide six, I've created some links for you. You'll have access to the heart I created by connecting dots, the heart I created with line segments, and then I actually created a heart using functions, and you're welcome to look at that to get some ideas. But what I would really suggest you go to are these two links here. These will introduce you to some other functions. If you're in high school, you might already be familiar with some of them or all of them. But this will give you a chance to play with how to use these functions to create different kinds of shapes. So for example, in parent function set 1, it has a bunch of instructions here. So just follow the instructions. It says first click on the triangle next to the name of the function you want to explore to open the folder. Then click on the 2 circles below the line numbers to show the graphs. So suppose I wanted to learn about the quadratic function. I click on the triangle, and then I click on the 2 circles below the line numbers, and you can see a graph has appeared. Line 2 says that the black circle indicates the parent function or the simplest form of the function. And so that doesn't change. That will just always show you the simplest form. And then the colored circle indicates what we call the transformed function. And it's transformed based on what we call parameters of the function. Parameters is just a formal name for saying the values that you add to the function. So you can see here, we can add in values for A, H, and K. You notice that it says that we can change these parameters, these values for A, H, and K, using the sliders on lines 24 to 27 to see how the function is transformed. So let me just quickly demonstrate that for you. So here I have A. If I make A bigger, you notice that my graph is more narrow. So you might be asking yourself, so what could I create with this? Well, maybe you want to create bunny ears. Easter's coming up. And so maybe I want to make a little more narrow curve so I could have some bunny ears. If I change my A in the opposite direction, you notice it becomes wider. That would not work for a bunny ear. But maybe I want to make a bowl or a cup. If I go, oh, did you notice what happened there? Once I went negative, the curve flipped. So this is actually going to help me make my bunny ear because I need it to be negative. So I have the little tip of my ear, but I need to make it more narrow. So again, the larger the value, if you ignore the sign, the larger the value of the number, we call that the magnitude of the number, the more narrow the graph will be. And so now I have the shape of the ear I may want to use. We could explore the other sliders. B. B's not doing anything with this function because if you notice, there is no B in the function. H lets us move left and right. K lets us move up and down. So maybe I might want to create the right ear of my bunny. And all I have to do now is just restrict the domain, restrict the X values for that graph, and then I have part of one ear. Notice that it says that when you're done exploring a function, click on the black and colored circles to hide the graphs, then click on the triangle to close the folder. And that's because all of these sliders are linked to all of the functions. And so just click the circles and close the folder, and then you can open up any other function. So you notice that when I open this one up, my orange curve is already weirded out. It's off to the side, and that's because I already changed some of these values earlier. So again, when I change my values, I can see what these different values will do to that curve. So think about, how could I use this square root curve? What could I create with that? So I encourage you to explore functions so you get some more tools in your toolkit. I also encourage you to explore some of these Desmos tutorials. Maybe you want to learn how to shade or how to do other shapes in there. Maybe you want to animate your picture using some sliders. So lots of great things that you could do with Desmos. To get some inspiration, I've shared with you some links to the Desmos art gallery where their staff has collected a bunch of images created by people all over the world. And then another little gallery created by Mr. Malk. He is a middle school teacher down in Santa Monica, California. And so these are some things that his students have created. Can you see the square root function in this race car? And finally, I'd like to challenge you or invite you to participate in Desmos Global Math Art Contest. So they're actually having a contest that's going on right now. It ends at the end of the month, April 30th. It's for any student aged 13 to 18. They just need an adult to help submit their piece of art. You can win. First prize is $500, or even if you don't win first prize, you can win a pizza party or a cool t-shirt. To find out more, I encourage you to visit the Desmos blog to find out more about the art contest. So I have fun playing with Desmos. I would love to see some of the things that you've created and share it with the world. Maybe one day we'll see you in the Desmos Art Gallery. Until next time, have fun doing mathematics.